And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another edition of 15 Minutes right here on King County TV. We're happy you joined us. My name is Andrew Huff. My guest today is a member of the King County Superior Court bench. He was re-elected last year. Before that, he spent a number of years with a successful private practice before becoming a judge. My guest today is King County Superior Court Judge Bill Bowman. Your Honor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're happy that you took the time to be with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How have you been?
I've been doing well, thanks. I just started a new rotation out at the Regional Justice Center, and so I'm settling in there, but things are going well.
And what's your current position? You're presiding judge, as I understand. Is that right?
I am chief of the Mailing Regional Justice Center, so chief judge of the Mailing Regional Justice Center.
And what do your duties require under that title?
I do a little bit of everything. I'm kind of the chief criminal judge, the chief civil judge, and the presiding judge for that particular facility. So I handle the criminal cases up until the time of trial. I do the arraignments, the bond hearings, some of the criminal motions. I do the case settings and the omnibus hearings, and then send them out to trial to our trial courtrooms. I handle a number of the civil motions that aren't assigned to other judges and other civil issues, and then I handle administrative issues and issues with the other judges in that facility.
Now, before you became a judge, as I mentioned, you had a very successful career in the private practice and a very well-known attorney in private practice for a number of years. Why did you decide to give up that successful private practice and run for judge where much of your private information becomes public, you need to raise money? Why did you give up that private practice to become a judge? What motivated you to do that?
You know, I loved being a trial attorney. It was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, and I had the pleasure of working with some very, very gifted people. I really enjoyed the experience. I actually started as a public defender, and then I went to the King County Prosecutor's Office after that, and then into private practice. When I hit about 16 years or so into my practice, I started to feel like I needed some new challenges. And I wasn't really sure what those challenges would be. I contemplated perhaps teaching. I contemplated perhaps leaving the practice of law altogether. And I was having a discussion with a then district court judge about my future and what I wanted to do. And she suggested that I try some pro tem work, which is sitting as a substitute judge in the district court. So I agreed to do that, and I loved it. It was everything that I'd hoped it would be. It was new challenges, a variety that I hadn't been able to experience before, a new perspective on the law. I then, a couple years after that, became the judge for the city of Black Diamond, and enjoyed that as well. I kind of wanted to feel what it was like to be a judge more full-time. So I enjoyed that as well, and that helped me to make the decision to run for Superior Court, and I'm happy I did.
Working in the private practice, I would imagine that you have faced a number of former colleagues as a judge across from you. What has that been like for you as a judge?
You know, it's interesting. I have faced a number of former colleagues. For the most part, there really haven't been any issues. And there are a few people that I recuse myself from hearing their cases on a pretty regular basis. But it's you know, it's a whole different perspective to see colleagues when you're on the bench rather than either across the aisle or working with them. But I haven't really had any major issues with it.
What would you say the biggest challenge facing the bench is these days? Is it simply a matter of too many cases, not enough courtrooms, or what is the biggest challenge that you're facing as a judge?
The biggest challenge is the budget, and it has been for quite some time. At the Regional Justice Center, we have a particularly difficult challenge right now with our growing caseload. As you know, any cases that occur south of I-90, for the most part, are filed out in the Mailing Regional Justice Center. And criminal cases particularly have grown to the point that they're a struggle for us to keep up with. The Regional Justice Center was designed to handle about 33% of the criminal cases, and for the last few years, pretty consistently, we've had about 45% of them. And many of those cases are very serious cases. We get more homicides out there, we get more domestic violence cases, we get more sexual assault types of cases, and so it's become more and more difficult to handle that volume of cases with the same resources. So that's probably our biggest challenge.
You mentioned the lack of or minimal funding. Has it been the fact that the prosecuting attorney's office has been unable to hire a significant amount of prosecuting attorneys? Is it court space? Is it a combination?
It is a combination of all of the above. The strain on the prosecutor's office, their loss of personnel and ability to keep up with their caseload, they try very hard to do so, but it's very difficult for them. The lack of funding for public defense services, as well as the lack of funding that we've experienced on the bench, coupled with the lack of space that we have at the Mailing Regional Justice Center now, and that's an issue that we're going to have to take on here pretty quickly about what we do in the future. The statistics tend to show that the growth in population is going to be primarily out in that south end, so I think it's time for us to be planning for how we're going to handle that in the future.
And just so folks don't know, felony cases are filed either at the RJC in Kent, the Regional Justice Center, or at the King County Courthouse here in Seattle. Is that correct?
Correct, depending on where the incident occurs, whether it's south of I-90 or not.
A little bit about you personally. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Whatcom County, a town called Laurel. It's, I'm not sure if you're familiar where Linden is, kind of up by the Canadian border.
Yes.
Laurel is between Linden and Ferndale, so I grew up in the middle of a bunch of dairy fields, essentially.
Where'd you go to high school?
Went to high school up through my sophomore year at Meridian High School. I actually started there my kindergarten year and went up through my sophomore year there, a very small high school out in Laurel. And then when I was a junior, we moved to the big city of Bellingham, and I went to Seaholm High School and graduated from Seaholm.
What did you do in high school? Active in sports, music? What was your...
Music was primarily what I did. I started playing drums at a pretty young age and played with school bands, concert bands, marching bands, jazz bands, those types of things. I started playing in bands outside of school at a pretty young age, and through high school I played in a band with in Bellingham that kind of toured the local bar circuit there. I had a minor musician permit, which allowed me to do that with the other members of the band who are all over 21. I would sit in a little room until it was time for us to go onto stage. They would usher me out there and we'd play the show and they would usher me back. I also played baseball, I played hockey, I played football, and it's about it.
Being a little bit modest about your music career, most people don't know you actually were in a pretty successful band in the 90s, I guess you could term the grunge era. Your band actually released an album. Your group is called the Hitmen.
It was.
And you released an album, what year did that album come out?
We released that album in 1990.
And the album was called Smash Face.
It was.
Why is love such a perfect pain? I ask myself again and again. I scratch my head, I rack my brain. Why is love such a perfect pain?
Did you and your band members write all the songs on that band, or do you have any covers? Or
all the songs on the album were written by members of the band. I didn't personally write any of them. I did create some, the drum lines and those types of things for them, but I didn't write the songs. We played shows all around town, and some of those shows we played some cover songs, but it was mostly original music.
What was your influence growing up in terms of music? What bands influenced you? Let me just guess. Led Zeppelin, Rush. Who influenced you in high school music?
More like Oingo Boingo, Devo.
Okay.
That was the genre that I was in the 80s. I did listen to Led Zeppelin, obviously, and Rush. Neil Peart was an amazing drummer. The Police, Stuart Copeland was a drummer I followed quite a bit. But about the time that I was really active in the music scene, Oingo Boingo and those types of bands were big and pretty inspirational to me.
You had a very unique perspective of the music scene in the 90s because you were an active musician performing. And just what an amazing time to be in Seattle musically during the 90s.
Incredible
just
time.
The energy going on, and labels were here wanting to sign the next big band. What was that like for you, being in sort of center stage during that music scene in the 90s?
It was a wonderful time. It really was. And in terms of the labels, at that time there was this drive to be signed by independent labels. We tried to shun the big corporate labels that were coming through. But there were a lot of bands playing in that scene. Mother Love Bone before they became Pearl Jam, Nirvana before Dave Grohl joined them. A lot of other bands, in that scene that we had the ability to be able to play in the same scene it was very supportive amongst the musicians. We would all go out and support each other at the shows. It was very eclectic. There were a lot of different styles of music that were going on. This was before the explosion into the grunge scene, and so you could see all different types of music all around downtown. It was a great experience.
With your album Smash Mouth, how would you describe the style of music that's on that album?
You know, it's been described in a lot of different ways.
Hopefully all positive.
Yeah, mostly positive. It was alternative rock, sort of indie. Some people have described some of it as psychobilly, just some very interesting stuff. Different types of independent alternative rock.
You had mentioned Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, obviously, and certainly the influence and the impact that he had on the music scene here. He's been called one of the greatest performers, singers, songwriters ever to come out of this area. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. You know, he was very cutting edge at the time, and he put himself out there into a style of music that was really, until then, unheard of. And it was a very difficult thing for him. Obviously, everybody understands now his struggles. We didn't understand that a lot at the time, but I would agree with that.
Yeah, he really seemed to chafe under the spotlight and always seemed uncomfortable. The more spotlight that his band received, that he received, and it seemed to truly have affected him in his career.
Without question,
Yeah.
in his career and in his personal life.
Yeah. And do you think that, what do you listen to now? What's the current form of music that you like to listen to?
I listen to a lot of different styles of music. I've been listening to a lot of reggae these days, been kind of into Revolution and some other reggae bands. I still listen to some of the older music. I listen to everything from classical to hard rock and everything in between. And I just enjoy music.
Yeah. It seems like the music that came out of the 90s during that time, the popularity of the music, I don't know if that's ever going to be replicated. I mean, I think Nevermind sold, 25 million
Right.
albums or something like that. Do you think we're ever going to see an era like we saw in the 90s musically?
You know, I doubt it. The music scene has changed quite a bit. The way that you create music has changed quite a bit. The way that music is promoted has changed quite a bit. And so I think there are fewer bands like Nirvana that make a smash onto the scene in the way that Nirvana was able to make that smash, just given the way that music is created and promoted these days.
A little bit more about you personally. I know that you are a big hockey fan. Not only you like to watch hockey, but you like to play. When did you start playing hockey? And this is ice hockey.
This
when
is
did you
ice
start
hockey.
playing ice hockey?
I started playing ice hockey. I was about 10 years old, I think, when I started playing ice hockey. We lived up by the Canadian border, and there was an old airplane hangar in Bellingham that they had converted into an ice rink, and a buddy of mine talked me into going out and trying it one day, and I fell in love with it. So I played from the time I was 10 until about the time that I was a junior in high school, and then I gave it up for a while.
And so during that, do you still play on occasion, organized hockey, or did you play for a while?
I did. I picked it up again when I was in my 20s, played adult hockey for quite some time, and then hurt my back and wasn't able to play after that. I still like to go out to stick and pucks, skate around a little bit, do those types of things, but I was never really that great of a hockey player. My son is the hockey player of the family, but I still like to go out with him and skate every now and then.
Well, you know, I've heard from my sources, and I have a lot of sources here in King County, as you know, that you actually were a pretty good player, and still are, that two things about you, Judge Bowman, that you're very fast on skates, and you're also a very physical player. Would you agree with those assessments of your style of play?
Your sources were very kind.
Yeah. And accurate.
I don't know that I was particularly speedy. I was a bit physical. I think that makes up for the lack of speed. But I really enjoyed it. I was very passionate about it. And if my body would allow, I'd still play. I love it.
Let me ask you about your opinion of hockey. Do you think that the city of Seattle could support an NHL team? There's been some movement and some discussion about renovating Seattle Center or adding another arena down in the Soto area. Do you think the city of Seattle could support an NHL team?
You know, I really hope so. And given the success that the Sounders have had, I think that there's a possibility that that could occur. You know, the introduction of soccer, a sport that a lot of people weren't real familiar with, and the acceptance that the city has had and the support for that sport, I really hope that people would show the same level of support for hockey. I think it's a wonderful sport. It'd be a great addition to this city, and I'm very hopeful.
We only have about a minute left or so. Tell me what's on your agenda in terms of the judiciary. What's next for you as a judge?
You know, I really want to be a better Superior Court judge. That's
so?
what I want to do. I just want to get better at what I do. I want to be able to communicate better. I want to get better at trying cases and doing all the things that we as Superior Court judges need to do. I want to experience different areas of what we do. I've had rotations through criminal and civil and into the administrative sort of rotation I have now. I look forward to an opportunity to get experience in family law and dependencies and all the other areas that we work in. It's all very fulfilling. I haven't had an opportunity yet to get to all the different areas, and that's what I want to do.
Are you and your colleagues continuing to make an effort to lobby the legislature every year for more funding?
Every year.
With success or mixed success?
We're hopeful this year.
Okay. Judge Bowman, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. And that's our show for today, everyone. We appreciate you joining us. Join us again for another edition of 15 Minutes. We'll see you soon.